Welcome to Legally Sevvy, where today we will talk about Blake Lively and the complaint that she filed on December 31st of 2024 against Wayfarer Studios and Justin Baldoni, as well as many other folks. And you might be wondering, well, why did she file a complaint? Why is it a big deal now? What is actually going on? Well, things are definitely heating up.
Lively accuses Baldoni of sexual harassment on the set of their film and a smear campaign against her. Mr. Baldoni denies those allegations, claiming the actress is attempting to damage his reputation.
Today, we will only talk about the Blake Lively complaint and what her allegations are. We will have a second video coming shortly to talk about the response from Baldoni and him showing the text messages that really counter a lot of the allegations that Blake Lively has raised. Let's talk first about the Blake Lively complaint. So as you guys might know, Blake Lively starred in a show called It Ends With Us. Well, a movie. And that movie went ahead. People saw it. She did some marketing around the movie. And then later she filed a complaint where she alleged that she was subjected to sexual harassment, even though there was an outline with steps that had to be done and had to be followed. They were not followed. She is suing because she believes that her reputation is on the line, and she is suing because of what happened to her, and because she said that she engaged in protected activity when she complained about the sexual harassment, and the response was retaliation, according to her in the complaint, because of it. So let's dig right into it. So the complaint here, you can find it in case 24 CV 10049. This becomes important because Justin Baldoni did file a new lawsuit that was then later consolidated into this case number. So if you're going to be looking for information about this case, that is the case number that you want to follow. But this is the Blake Lively complaint, and let's get through it. It is pretty lengthy. So the introduction does a really good job of explaining what the allegations are here. Again, Blake Lively is suing Wayfarer Studios, Justin Baldoni, Jamie Haith, Steve, It Ends With Us Movie LLC, Melissa Nathan, and the agency Group PR LLC, and Jennifer Abel. And you will hear some of these names as we go through the text messages that were incorporated into the complaint as part of exhibits. It starts with the statement that on January 4th, prior to resuming the filming, Blake Lively met with Justin Baldoni and with Jamie Heath and Ange Gennady, Alex Sachs, Todd Black, and herself, to talk about issues that had been happening during filming. And the idea was to come up with an outline of behavior and conduct that was agreed upon so that filming could continue and, so that she and other folks could also feel safe and, while they were filming. It is pretty lengthy. The 30 points in there, it is pretty lengthy, but they do go into some of the allegations that Blake Lively has raised. So we'll go through them as well. So during the January 4th meeting, this is the outline. 1. No more showing nude videos or images of women, including producer's wife, to Blake Lively and or her employees. No more mentioning of Mr. Baldoni or Mr. Heath's previous pornography addiction or Blake Lively's lack of pornography consumption to her or other crew members. No more discussions to Blake Lively and or her employees about personal experiences with sex, including as it relates to spouses or others. No more mentioning to Blake Lively or her employees of personal times that physical consent was not given in sexual acts as either the abuser or the abused. No more descriptions of their own genitalia to Blake Lively. No more jokes or disparaging comments to be made to Blake Lively and or her employees about HR complaints Wayfarer has already received on set or about missing the HR meeting. And this will come up as we're going through some of the factual allegations. It's one of the things that comes up in there. No more inquiries to Mr. Baldoni to Blake Lively, trainer, without her knowledge or consent to disclose her weight. And that actually, I think, made the news. Actually, there was a couple of stories that only centered on that and seemed to make it like the discussion was only about the weight, which, definitely this is more about that. No more mention by Mr. Baldoni of him speaking to Blake Lively's dead father. No more pressing by Mr. Baldoni for Blake Lively to disclose her religious beliefs or unsolicited sharing of his. If Blake Lively and or her infant is exposed to COVID again, Blake Lively must be provided with immediate notice as soon as Wayfarer or any other producers become aware of such exposure without her needing to uncover days later herself. Have an intimacy coordinator must be present at all times when Blake Lively is on the set in scenes with Mr. Baldoni. Now, this is one of the big items that Blake Lively talked about in her complaint was the fact that an intimacy coordinator was not hired. She was giving an interview about the movie, talked about the fact that movies needed to hire intimacy coordinator.
Blake, you always have a vision. So talk to me about how sometimes you were even the intimacy coordinator in some of those sexier scenes. Like we saw you.
That shouldn't be happening, by the way. I just want to be clear that you should not be the intimacy coordinator. You should definitely hire intimacy coordinators, which we did have.
Well,
thank goodness.
You were teaching Justin how to pull you in.
Where have you seen
that.
That
I actually just saw it too. It was on Instagram yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that romance is really important. You're supposed to tell a story well and make people feel, but you're also supposed to do it in a way that is like safe and respectful for all. I guess that's the role of intimacy coordination. But when I think of my involvement in the film, I don't really see that as the thing that I did. I did probably everything else. You touched on everything else here and there, but yeah, we were really lucky I'm fortunate to be able to have had such a all-encompassing experience on this film.
12. No more personal, physical touching of or sexual comments by Mr. Baldoni or Mr. Heath to be tolerated by Blake Lively and or any of her employees, as well as any female cast or crew without their express consent. No more improvising of kissing. All intimate touch must be choreographed in advance with Blake Lively and an intimacy coordinator. No biting or sucking lip without Blake Lively's consent. And all intimate on-camera touch and conversations must be in character, not spoken from Mr. Baldoni to Blake Lively personally. Again, this is part of some of the factual allegations that were made, and we'll go through those specific ones as well. 14. Blake likely to have a representative on set at all times that will monitor nude scenes, sexual activity, or violence with Mr. Baldoni. 15. All actors participating with Blake Lively in intimate scenes involving her being in any state, so any state, either it's real or not, nude scenes, must be classified as active working actors and not friends of the director or producers, and must be pre-approved by Blake. No more filming of any nudity without fully executed SEC-compliant nudity rider in place. Any such footage already shot without this rider in place and in direct violation of SAG requirements may not be used without her and her legal representative's prior written consent. So there is a section that they didn't follow the writers at all. 17. Any scene made by Blake Lively or other performer depicting the character of Lily that involves basically being nude or simulated sex must be conducted strictly in accordance with the above reference writer and must adhere to the approved script. 18. An intimacy coordinator must be on set for all scenes, so they must have a monitor to ensure compliance. No monitors to be viewed or accessible on set or remotely during closed set scenes except by Blake Lively approved essential crew and personnel. No more entering, attempting to enter, interrupting, pressuring, or asking Blake Lively to enter her trailer or the makeup trailer by Mr. Heath or Mr. Baldoni while she is nude. No more private multi-hour meetings in Blake Lively's trailer with Mr. Baldoni crying with no outside Blake Lively appointed representative to monitor. No more pressing by Mr. Baldoni to sage any of Blake Lively's employees. Producer Alice Sachs must be given standard rights, inclusion, and authority per her job description as represented to Blake Lively when signing on. Sony must have an active daily role in overseeing physical production for the remainder of the building to monitor safety for cast and crew, schedule, logistics, problem solving, and creative. 25. Engagement of an experienced producer to supervise the safety of the cast and crew, schedule, logistics, problem solving, and creative for the remainder of the shoot. 26. Engagement of Blake Lively approved. A-list stunt double to perform Lily in scenes with Mr. Baldoni involving R or violence. Blake Lively to perform only close-up work from Blake Lively pre-approved shot list in scenes with Mr. Baldoni involving sexual violence. 27. No more adding of sex scenes, oral sex, or on-camera climaxing by Blake Lively outside of the scope of the script approved when she signed onto the project. 28. No more asking or pressuring Blake Lively to cross physical picket lines. 29. No more retaliatory or abusive behavior for raising concerns or requesting safeguards. And 30. An in-person meeting before production resumes with Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, Miss Sachs, the Sony representative, the new producer, Blake Lively's spouse, Ryan Reynolds, to confirm and approve a plan for implementation of the above. So that really is a discussion from that meeting that set up the outline of what needed to happen. Some of those items that were described in the outline are a part of the complaint, so we'll go through them a little bit more in depth. And particularly, I want you to keep that in mind too when you review and listen to the video that talks about Justin's response to the complaint. So the marketing plan here that was made after the movie ended and was released was to make sure that they focused on Lily's strength and resilience as opposed to describing the film as a story about domestic violence, and to avoid talking about this film in a way that makes it feel sad or heavy, because the purpose of it was that it was a story about hope. The complaint describes that in the days leading up to the film's release, Mr. Baldoni abruptly pivoted away from the marketing plan and the types of publicity activities in which he had previously participated. What the public did not know was that Mr. Baldoni and his team did so in an effort to explain why many of the cast and crew had unfollowed Mr. Baldoni on social media and were not appearing with him in public. At this point, they talk about the beginning of the campaign against Blake Lively by Mr. Baldoni, so we'll get into that a little bit as well. The plan was to hire the agency group PR LLC, which in the complaint is referred to as TAG, which included Melissa Nathan. And Miss Nathan and TAG talked frequently with Jennifer Abel, talked about what they expected the company to do. Miss Nathan delivered a proposal to Mr. Baldoni, which included a website to discuss, full Reddit, full social account takedowns, full social crisis team on hand for anything, engage with audiences in the right way, start threads of theories that is to be fully 100% protected. Ms. Nathan also proposed the creation of social fan engagement to go back and forth with any negative accounts, helping to change the narrative and stay on track. Per Ms. Nathan, all of this would be most importantly untraceable. As Ms. Abel described it, the plan was to engage in social media mitigation and proactive fan posting to counter the negative as well as social manipulation. Blake Lively obtained all the communications are part in this complaint as part of a subpoena that was served on Jones Works LLC. The complaint states that this plan went beyond the standard crisis of PR, and we'll talk more about the scenario planning. So on August 2nd of 2024, TAG circulated a scenario planning document which described preparations and strategies should Blake and her team make her grievances public. So in order to get ahead of the narrative, the plan proposed strategies to advance misleading counter-narratives, including pushing Miss Nathan's narrative that Blake had a less than favorable reputation and proposing to explore planting stories about the weaponization of feminism. and misleadingly blaming Blake Lively for the production's members' job losses. So these are the start of the discussions that we see of the media campaign. Justin Baldoni is, expressing his concerns. He's writing to Mr. Heath and Miss Abel. And this is what he says. So we're going to assume it. Morning, not in love with the document they sent. Not sure I'm feeling the protection I felt on the call. Reply. This is the first time I've personally gone through scenario planning with them. So I think let's let them discuss the thinking behind the document and the actual process and protocol of how they implement these things. That's the most important part of this, how quickly they can shut things down and play stories in your favor. Be honest on his call and let's get real feedback on his point. Justin replied, yeah, it just feels very much like there's not much defense and also them feeling strong like she's going to do something just a bit concerning what everybody had originally thought. Later that day, Jennifer Bell sent a text message to Miss Nathan. In the text message Jennifer sends to Melissa, she says, you can of course do that, but I do think he needs to know. I'm going to confidentially send you something he's texted me and Jamie on the side, just to arm you before this call. I think you guys need to be tough and show the strength of what you guys can do in these scenarios. He wants to feel like she can be buried. Melissa then replies, of course, but when we send over documents, we can't send them over the work we will do or could do because that could get us in a lot of trouble. We can't write it down to him. We can't write, we will destroy her. We will go to this. We will do this. We will do this. We will do this. He has to look at it as information document for us to be armed with. That's all. Imagine if a document saying all the things that he wants us end up in the wrong hands. Melissa then replied, we can bury anyone, but I can't write that to him. I will be very tough. A few days later, on August 5th, Mr. Baldoni sent the narrative for the social media campaign, sending Miss Abel a screenshot of a thread on X that had accused another female celebrity of bullying women. Mr. Baldoni stated, this is what we would need. A reply was, yes, literally just spoke to Melissa about this on the break about what we discussed last night for social and digital focus on Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram. With the assurance, of course, that Blake would be destroyed and buried. At that point, Mr. Baldoni and Wayfarer directed Miss Nathan and her team to actively engage in what the complaint says is retaliatory social manipulation campaign. So this will talk a little bit more about it. In the weeks and the months that followed, with the direction and approval of Wayfarer and Mr. Baldoni, the team engaged in a sophisticated, coordinated, and well-financed retaliation plan. The retaliation campaign relied on more than just publicists and crisis managers spinning stories. They also retained subcontractors, including a Texas-based contractor named Jed Wallace, who weaponized a digital army around the country from New York to Los Angeles to create, seed, and promote content that appeared to be authentic on social media platforms and internet chat forums. The Baldoni Wayfarer team would then feed pieces of this manufactured content to unwitting reporters, making the content go viral in order to influence public opinion and thereby cause an organic pile-on. So on August 10th, the day after the release of the film, Miss Nathan's team reported that they had started to see a shift on social due largely to Jed and his team's efforts to shift the narrative. That same day, Miss Nathan noted that as part of this shift, the majority of socials are pro-Justin, even though, she says, I don't even agree with half of them, LOL. Miss Nathan then bragged to Miss Abel and Mr. Baldoni that he doesn't realize how lucky he is right now, referring to the behavior that Mr. Baldoni was accused of. The whispering in the ear, the sexual connotations, like Jesus fucking Christ. Other members feeling uncomfortable watching it. I mean, it is just so much. Less than a week later, then, they again bragged about how they had shut down stories regarding the human resources complaints on set. On August 15th, she said, Jen, this went so well. I am fucking dying. I have to call you later in a bit and tell you how this went. It was genius. So, okay, we have the 4 majors standing down on HR complaint, I think we are fine on that bit. On August 15th, Miss Nathan circulated a Daily Mail article that was titled, "Is Blake Lively Set to Be Cancelled?" String of hard-to-watch videos that have surfaced following tone-deaf Q&A to promote It Ends With Us could tarnish 36-year-old star's golden Hollywood image for good. To which Ms. Abel responded, "Wow, you really outdid yourself with this piece." And Ms. Nathan replied, "That's why you hired me, right? I am the best." As their own words reveal, the purpose of social manipulation plan was twofold. It aimed to conceal the pattern of harassment and other misconduct, and B, to retaliate against Miss Lively by battering her image, harming her businesses, and causing her and her family severe emotional harm. Millions of people, including many reporters and influencers who saw these planted stories, social media posts, and other online content, had no idea they were unwitting consumers of a crisis PR, astroturfing, and digital retaliation campaign that was created and funded by Mr. Baldoni and Wafer to hurt Blake Lively. As he laid out in the complaint, Mr. Baldoni and Wafer led the public attack that was the intended result of a carefully crafted, coordinated, resource retaliatory scheme to silence her and others from speaking out against the hostile environment that Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath created. As such, it was not only unconscionable and a breach of contract, but also illegal under both state and federal law. So the complaint itself does focus on sexual harassment claims, breach of contract, the fact that they didn't use the writer that was mentioned earlier today, and we'll kind of go through that as well. The fact that they didn't do anything to stop it, and then the fact that they hired a PR campaign with the purpose of going after Blake Lively. And they are calling that retaliation because they're saying it's a retaliation for her engaging in a protective act, which was complaining about the sexual harassment. Let's talk about the factual allegations here. Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath engaged in inappropriate and unwelcome behavior towards Blake Lively and others on the set of It Ends With Us. In here, they describe who they are. Mr. Baldoni launched a Wafer along with Mr. Sorowitz in 2020. Mr. Heath serves as the chief executive officer. Under the Wafer banner, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath have many platforms, including the Man Enough podcast, which they co-host. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath have positioned Wafer as a male feminist platform that explores gender roles, dismantles toxic masculinity, and creates a safer and judgment-free society for women. Mr. Baldoni serves not only as the co-founder and co-chairman of the studio that financed and ran production on It Ends With Us, but also served as a director, executive producer, and co-lead actor, playing the role of Ryle Kincaid. In his words, he was the leader who sat at the top of this totem pole. Production began early May of 2023 and lasted until it was suspended mid-June due to the Writers Guild strike. During that time, Ms. Lively and other cast and crew experienced invasive, unwelcome, unprofessional, and sexually inappropriate behavior by Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath. So these are the factual allegations that Blake Lively is putting out. Mr. Baldoni ignored well-established industry protocols in filming intimate scenes and exploited the lack of controls on set to behave inappropriately. So if you're wondering what was the whole thing about having an intimate privacy coach, well, this is what it is about. So Wayfair failed to adhere to guild rules as well as Ms. Lively's contract and standard industry safety protocols with respect. The safeguards that Blake Lively says Wayfair ignored included providing performers with appropriate notice of nude scenes and simulated sex, ensuring that consent is given free of pressure or coercion, signed nudity writers that are in place, spelling out the parameters of the scenes, and have safe and secure working conditions that are not detrimental to a performer's health, safety, morals, and career, as well as using intimacy coordinators that will observe intimate scenes. So without these protections in place, Justin improvised physical intimacy that had not been rehearsed, choreographed, or discussed with Blake and had no intimacy coordinator involved. So for example, complaint states that Justin discreetly bit and sucked on Blake's lower lip during a scene in which he improvised numerous kisses on each take. Justin insisted on shooting the full scene over and over again, well beyond what would have been required on an ordinary set and without advance notice or consent. On another occasion, Justin and Blake were filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene, but did not act in character. Instead, he spoke to Blake out of character as himself, at what point he leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear and down her neck and said, "It smells so good." None of this was remotely in character or based on any dialogue in the script, and nothing needed to be said because, again, there was no sound. Mr. Baldoni was caressing with his mouth in a way that had nothing to do with their roles. When Miss Lively later objected to the behavior, his response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." The complaint also states that Justin inserted improvised gratuitous sexual content and scenes involving nudity into the film, including for an underage character, in highly unsettling ways. After Blake signed onto the movie based on a draft of the script, Mr. Baldoni, without her consent or knowledge, personally added graphic content, including a scene in which she was to orgasm on camera. When she objected to these additions, Mr. Baldoni insisted that he had added them because he was making the film through the female gaze. Although he agreed to remove the scenes, he made a last-ditch attempt to keep one in which the couple orgasmed together on their wedding night, which he said was important to him because he and his partner climaxed simultaneously during intercourse. Mr. Baldoni then intrusively asked Blake whether she and her husband climaxed simultaneously during intercourse, which she found invasive and refused to discuss. On the day of shooting the scene in which Blake's character gives birth, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath suddenly pressured Miss Lively to simulate full nudity, despite no mention of it in the script, in her contract, or previous creative discussions. Mr. Baldoni said that woman gave birth naked and that his wife had ripped off her clothes during labor. He claimed it was not normal for women to remain in their hospital gowns while giving birth. Blake disagreed but felt forced into a compromise that she would be naked from below the chest down. When the scene was filmed, the set was chaotic, crowded, and utterly lacking in standard industry protections for filming nude scenes, such as choreographing the scene with an intimacy coordinator, having a signed nudity writer, or simply turning off the monitors so the scene was not broadcast to all crew on set. Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni also failed to close the set, allowing non-essential crew to pass through while Blake was mostly nude with her legs spread wide in stirrups and only a small piece of fabric covering her genitalia. Among the non-essential persons present that day was Wayfarer co-chairman, who flew in for one of the few set visits. Miss Lively was not provided with anything to cover herself in between takes until she had made multiple requests. Miss Lively became even more alarmed when Mr. Baldoni introduced his best friend to play the role of the OBGYN, when ordinarily a small role of this nature would be filled by a local actor. Miss Lively felt that the selection of his friend for this intimate role, in which the actor's face and hands are in close proximity to her nearly nude genitalia for a bitch scene, was invasive and humiliating. The complaint then talks about the fact that to add insult to injury, Mr. Heath approached Blake and her assistant on set and started playing a video of a fully nude woman with her legs spread apart. Blake thought he was showing her pornography and stopped him. Mr. Heath explained that the video was his wife giving birth. Miss Lively was alarmed and asked Mr. Heath if his wife knew he was sharing the video, to which he replied she isn't weird about this stuff, as if Miss Lively was weird for not welcoming it. Miss Lively and her assistant excused themselves, stunned that Mr. Heath had showed them a nude video. Mr. Baldoni added also a detailed scene to the film in which the underage version of Miss Lively's character, Lily, loses her virginity. In both the book and the script for the film, there was no sex scene. Instead, the details about this moment were left to the audience imagination. but Mr. Baldoni added inconsiderable details, including both dialogue between young Lily and her boyfriend about the loss of her virginity, as well as simulated sex scene in which Mr. Baldoni filmed and included in his initial cut of the film, a close-up of young Lily's face, accompanied by an audible gasp at the moment of penetration. Miss Lively was informed that when this scene was shot, after Mr. Baldoni called cut, he walked over to the actors and said, "I know I'm not supposed to say this, but that was hot. And did you two practice this before?" Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath discussed their personal sexual experiences and previous porn addiction and tried to pressure Miss Lively to reveal details about her intimate life. So again, these are allegations in the complaint. During a car ride with Miss Lively, her assistant driver, Mr. Baldoni, claimed to Miss Lively that he had been sexually abused by a former girlfriend, which he has since shared publicly. At the end of the story, Mr. Baldoni shared that it had caused him to re-examine his past. He then said, "Did I always ask for consent? No. Did I always listen when they said no? No." Mr. Baldoni claimed that this was an example of how we all have things from which we can learn and grow. Miss Lively was unsettled by Mr. Baldoni's suggestion that he had engaged in sexual conduct without consent. When Miss Lively exited the car, her driver immediately remarked that he did not want Blake to be alone with Mr. Baldoni going forward. On the first day of production, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath described their past sexual relationships to Blake, including that one of them used to hook up with a woman. Mr. Baldoni said that he had decided that woman wasn't the one, so then Mr. Heath had gotten together with her. Mr. Lively found his description of passing along a woman to be disrespectful and disturbing. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath often spoke of their previous pornography addiction. Mr. Baldoni would often reference pornography to Blake. Hoping to shut the subject down, she said to him privately that she had never seen it. Later, when Mr. Baldoni was again referencing his experiences with pornography, he revealed in front of other cast and crew that Miss Lively had never seen porn. It was an incredible invasion of her privacy to discuss any aspect of her intimate life with the cast and crew, much less to reveal something that she had only told Mr. Baldoni to get him to stop talking about the subject with her. Mr. Baldoni engaged in other behaviors that were shocking and emotionally distressing. For example, he claimed he could speak to the dead, and on several occasions told her that he had spoken to her dead father. It was off-putting and violative for Mr. Baldoni to claim a personal relationship with her recently deceased father. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath were also constantly hugging and touching the cast and the crew. Blake and others avoided this touching. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath would retaliate by becoming irritated, cold, and uncollaborative. The result was an unwelcoming, mercurial environment for Blake, her employees, and others on the set. The complaint then goes on and states that Baldoni objectified Blake and another woman by commenting on and criticizing their bodies as sex objects. Mr. Baldoni often referred to women in the workplace as sexy. When they expressed discomfort, Mr. Baldoni would deflect or try to pass it off, which undermined Blake Lively and others' concerns. For example, on one occasion that Miss Lively observed, he told a female cast member that her leather pants looked sexy when she arrived on set. When she rebuffed his comment because she was uncomfortable, rather than apologizing, he brushed it off with, "I can't say that because my wife is here today." Miss Lively felt embarrassed witnessing his kind of commentary, as did others. On another day, Miss Lively wore a low-cut dress to facilitate breastfeeding, but have it covered up with a coat. When the jacket briefly popped open at one point to reveal the dress, Mr. Baldoni commented about how much he liked her outfit, which flustered Miss Lively. Later that day, Mr. Baldoni pressured Blake, who was in her pre-approved wardrobe, to remove her coat in front of the crew and multiple background actors in a packed bar. He said that he wanted to see her onesie under her coat because it was zipped low to reveal her lace bra. Consistent with past practice, he said, "I think you look sexy," in a tone that made her feel ogled and exposed. With other female cast members present, she said, "That's not what I'm going for." He bristled and replied, "I'm sorry, hot." Deeply uncomfortable, Miss Lively said, "Not that either." Mr. Baldoni responded sarcastically, "I guess I missed the HR meeting," and walked away. Another woman on the production spoke to Miss Lively afterward to offer empathy and to share her own similar experiences with Mr. Baldoni, commenting about her in sexual terms. As a result of his behavior, on May 29th of 2023, another cast member lodged a sexual harassment complaint about Mr. Baldoni's gross and unwanted comments towards her and others. While on the other hand, Mr. Baldoni was objectifying Blake as a sex object, on the other hand, he went out of his way to message criticisms of her age and weight, neither of which she could change during filming. On the second day of filming, for example, Mr. Baldoni made the rest of the cast and crew wait for hours, while he cried in Miss Lively's dressing room, claiming social media commenters were saying that Blake looked old and unattractive based on paparazzi photos from the set. Mrs. Lively tried to reassure him that she should look authentic in scenes depicted in the photos, which were just after her character had been abused by her fictional husband rather than hot. Mr. Baldoni, however, appeared focused on her sexual appeal above all else. His lengthy outbursts caused a delay in shooting, forcing an emotional scenes to be shot haphazardly. To make matters worse, when Blake tried to have a meeting with Mr. Heath and other producers to discuss Mr. Baldoni's unprofessional behavior described above, the meeting turned yet into another violation. Rather than an ordinary meeting, time and place, Mr. Heath arrived unannounced at her hair makeup trailer while she was topless and having her body makeup removed by makeup artists. Miss Lively told Mr. Heath that she was almost done and they could meet once she was clothed. Mr. Heath, however, insisted that if she did not allow him into her trailer to speak with him at that moment, there would be no meeting with the producers. Miss Lively reluctantly agreed, but asked that Mr. Heath keep his back turned. A few minutes into the conversation, she noticed that Mr. Heath was staring directly at her while she was topless. When she called him out, he brushed it off as a habit of wanting to look at a person while speaking to them. Miss Lively and her hair and makeup artist were all deeply disturbed by the interaction on just the second day of filming. Throughout the filming, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath invaded her privacy by entering her makeup trailer uninvited while she was undressed, including when she was breastfeeding her infant child. Miss Lively often had to work while breastfeeding, which she felt comfortable doing so as long as she was given the time and space to cover herself. She did this frequently because she was not given breaks to feed her baby. But Miss Lively did not expect or consent to anyone entering her private spaces while she was topless, exposed, and vulnerable with her newborn, or doing body makeup application or removal. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath both showed a shocking lack of boundaries by invading her personal space while she was undressed and vulnerable. Mr. Baldoni also routinely degraded Blake by finding back channel waist or criticizing her body and weight. A few weeks before filming began, and less than 4 months after Miss Lively had given birth to her fourth child, Miss Lively was humiliated to learn that Mr. Baldoni secretly called her fitness trainer without her knowledge or permission, and implied that he wanted her to lose weight in 2 weeks. Mr. Baldoni told the trainer that he had asked because he was concerned about having to pick Miss Lively up in a scene for the movie, but there was no such scene. When Miss Lively caught strep throat, Mr. Baldoni offered as a gift to connect with an expert he had on retainer to help with probiotics and combat sickness. When Miss Lively went to fill out the privacy form, she saw that the expert was not the expert he had represented, but a weight loss specialist. Miss Lively felt once again that Mr. Baldoni was shaming her for her body and her weight. When they failed to implement COVID protocols when there was a COVID outbreak on set, Miss Lively was told by another producer that because Wayfarer did not have insurance coverage for COVID, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath deliberately withheld from Blake that she had been exposed to COVID. Both Blake and her infant child contracted COVID from the outbreak. Complaint then talks about the grievances that were lodged regarding the conduct, which Wayfarer declined to investigate. Again, these are allegations at this point. They have not been proven to be true. So here it says, Wayfarer failed to produce Miss Lively with even rudimentary employment protections, such as an employee handbook, sexual harassment policy information, or any training on sexual harassment, discrimination, or respectful workplace expectations. They also failed to provide Miss Lively with information about the process and procedure for filing human resources complaints. As the producer and owner of the film, Wayfarer was legally obligated to address human resources related concerns or complaints, but to her knowledge, Wayfarer lacked any process for responding to complaints about its leadership. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath, who plainly were not going to investigate themselves. Wayfarer, Mr. Baldoni, and Mr. Heath received or were aware of a number of HR grievances regarding their conduct. For example, on the first day of filming, by attempting to hug Miss Lively's employee, Mr. Heath said, "I don't even know if we're allowed to do this. It's day one, and we have an HR report already." Additionally, early in the production, another actress made a complaint about Mr. Baldoni's comments on her appearance. Mr. Baldoni expressly acknowledged her concerns in writing statement stating, "Adjustments will be made accordingly." Yet on June 8th of 2023, that actress informed Blake that outside of anything in a scene, "I cannot talk to Justin at all." After unsuccessfully attempting to raise concerns with Sony, Ms. Lively expressly told Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath that there were serious HR problems on set. Mr. Heath responded that they knew, implying that someone had mentioned it to them, that Blake had raised concerns. In response, Mr. Heath told Ms. Lively that he thought she had wanted to see the nude video of his wife. In the same conversation with Ms. Lively expressed her upset that Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni had hidden the fact that she had been exposed to COVID and that she and her infant contracted COVID. Instead of acknowledging responsibility and committing to safety moving forward, they expressed upset over production days missed and resulting costs. Despite receiving multiple detailed reports by Ms. Lively and others about Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath's conduct, Wayfarer failed to investigate those reports or to institute protections for the cast. So that is most of the complaint that we have from Blake Lively. Based on the complaint that you're seeing right now, tell me what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button and stay tuned for part 2, where we will go over what Justin Baldoni has to say and the receipts that he is bringing with him. Stay tuned, and I will talk to you later. Bye, everybody.